It's important to be in the studio, but you also have to be out in the world and talking to artists and talking to people outside of the arts. You have to have this community, these connections, and really be passionate. Super important to be passionate because whatever you're feeling about what you're painting, that's going to come through.
The art world is always changing. It's a dynamic space where creativity and commerce collide. Finding your path and staying true to your craft isn't easy. Welcome to the Professional Artist Podcast. This show explores what it truly takes to build a meaningful and sustainable art career. Each week, we offer intimate, in-depth conversations that reveal which business strategies actually work, giving you the inspiration and insight to fuel your artistic journey. I'm your host today, Christina Demiani, and in this episode, we explore the world of Lisa Lebofsky, a nomadic plein air painter. With years of experience traveling to remote parts of the globe, Lisa's work captures the vulnerability of nature and humanity, blending abstraction and realism to document endangered landscapes. Today, we'll take a look at the unique approaches that define Lisa's art and business. Here's what you'll gain from our discussion. Painting outside. Lisa describes how direct participation with the landscape through plein air painting and travel gives her work a dynamic energy that fosters emotional connection. Community and collaboration. Lisa emphasizes the role of artist networks and professional connections in sustaining an art career and fostering resilience during challenging times. Navigating uncertainty. Lisa shares how she's recalibrating her art business in uncertain economic conditions, leaning on her creativity to generate new sources of income. All right, let's head into the gallery and explore the world of Lisa Lebofsky. We're starting off today with a striking painting called Melting Iceberg 7, a piece rooted deeply in nature and vulnerability. Lisa tells us the story of this work and explains how media exposure has broadened her audience and sparked new conversations about the meaning behind her art.
It's an interesting piece because it's 4 foot by 6 foot. And it was the last in a series I had made of these melting icebergs. What I was doing was I've been traveling to places like Greenland and Labrador and Newfoundland. And I severed the tips of the icebergs off. I isolated them from the base of the iceberg and put them into these floating non-spaces. And as I painted them, I sprayed them with water because I often like to have nature have its hand in the creation of the work. So I would paint this representational iceberg, spray it with water, and eviscerate the image. So the drips at the bottom is the paint falling off of the surface. It's on aluminum. And I just would repeat that over and over again until the resulting image that I'd be content with. And the idea being that I saw these floating ice islands as vulnerable. They are slowly melting to their demise as they break off of the ice sheet from Greenland and go down the Labrador Current to Newfoundland. They are falling apart, like they're literally melting. And so I wanted them to just be this isolated object in this cold field of metal that as you look at it, the way the light reflects off of the aluminum changes the look of the painting as well. What I would do is when I was on site at these locations, or what I always do for my practice is I often paint on site and plein air. So I have the unique sense of the air and the tastes and the sounds. And I bring that back into the studio. So it's always important for me to have that time with the subject to have people viscerally connect with it when I'm then recreating it in the studio. So why it represents my practice as a whole is because it starts from that firsthand experience with the subject, which for me is nature. I visit these places that are vulnerable due to climate change, these endangered and shifting landscapes or dying landscapes. I paint bird forests, land ravaged by extraction, invasive species that have overcome an environment. So the icebergs in particular, with this piece, I was going to these Arctic places. I've also been to Antarctica, but witnessing these vulnerable landscapes and then bringing them into the studio with the hand of nature to manipulate. I also work with plants and painting, or I'll rub dirt on paintings. This piece in particular was featured on a TV show, Apple TV's Severance in season 2. They actually found my work on Artsy. I don't know their full story, but I think had a visual of what they wanted and then came across my work. And when they reached out to me, they originally were interested in the original painting, which is 4 foot by 6 foot, as I mentioned, but it was in a private collection. So they wanted a JPEG that could be enlarged to that size. And so I provided that for them. But then when the show came out, it was actually printed very small, which conceptually works brilliantly for the show. So it's interesting to see something that I had made on such a large scale, then recreated and living in out in the wild on a smaller scale. The season that my painting is on did just air. So I don't know for sure yet how broad the exposure may be, but I have met some very interesting people who've reached out to me, having conversations about the work, interviewing me about it, like, how did this happen? But also wanting to know more about the concept behind it, which is great to talk about because these are people that aren't necessarily in the art world. And so they're not thinking about my process. They're thinking about, okay, what does this iceberg represent? What is this image before me? So I've had some great conversations about the iceberg theory, where 10% is above water, 90% is submerged, and what that means in terms of psychology. Not everything is as it seems, the depths of what can be below it. My original interest in them were these vulnerable floating ice islands that are just in this unfeeling ocean, just taken away from their home and floating aimlessly. But it's interesting to them have it in the scope of a different context and chatting with people with different varied backgrounds and talking about other meanings for what this could be.
Lisa doesn't just seek out beauty in remote locations. She embraces the full experience of being there, even in the most challenging environments. Listen as she shares what it really takes to paint outdoors in extreme conditions.
I really like the cold. I actually like extreme weather. I've painted in the Maldives, I've painted in the Caribbean, I've painted in a lot of deserts. So I've painted in very hot, dry, and wet environments as well. But I do personally have an affinity for the cold. And it really truly is just dressing for it, being aware that these elements do exist and making sure that you will be warm and you will be dry and that you have layers. Big thing for painting is making sure your hands are warm, having the hand warmers, the layers, the right kinds of gloves that you still have dexterity with your fingers. In the warmer climates, also making sure you're well hydrated, but adequately protected from both insects and the sun, which means you do have to be covered up, even though it's so hot. So, also finding a shady spot or a place near a body of water so you can frequently dip in and come out and paint some more. The only problem to plein air painting that I see is wind, because that just blows everything over. And there are ways to work around that. Having some sort of shelter, like whether it be a sturdy tree, I have been around trees that have fallen. So a sturdy tree or a building or a rock wall, or just making sure you're low to the ground, right? Like that you're just not too highly exposed, painting on the ground with your easel down low or in your lap or holding it securely.
Were you always driven as an artist to go out into the world and capture it, or did you start in the studio and gradually move into this practice?
I grew up in the woods. So I think that's just what I'm used to. It's my home. I told my parents when I was young that I wanted to be an artist when I grew up. And when I was 4, they sent me to art classes, and the school I happened to go to was in the woods also with a waterfall behind it. And the woman that I studied with for 10 years taught me Chinese watercolor and about capturing that unique energy of nature and bringing that into your work. There was this waterfall. We would just try to capture this moving object. And what does that mean? And how do you do it? How do you find these rhythms within nature? So that just stayed with me. And at one point, when I went to SUNY New Paltz for undergrad, I studied metalsmithing. So I just wanted something completely different, which still completely impacted the work that I make today because I paint on the aluminum and I do find the mark making meditation very similar to hammering techniques and metalwork. And coming back after undergrad, I moved back to where I grew up and realizing I still wanted to paint. And then rediscovering plein air painting at a workshop I took in grad school at the New York Academy of Art. I was taking this plein air workshop in Italy and realized, no, this is my comfort. Being in nature is really what I do. It's who I am. It's what I want to paint. It's what I'm passionate about. So that just really brought it all full circle. And here we are today.
Lisa is passionate about adventurous travel and documenting endangered landscapes. While those experiences can have solitary moments, Lisa is clear that community and collaboration are key to success in this process.
Working collaboratively, I think for any artist, it's essential. We exist in a community and you have to have your people. But specific to embarking on this, there is a lot of solitude to going out in nature and painting. But if you're going on these expeditions to, regions that don't have a lot of facilities or resources, it's good to have your squad, I guess is what they say, your people that you're traveling with to these places. And it's also more invigorating as you're bouncing ideas. And especially for me, the work that I'm doing, there is a real science element and understanding the biology, the geology, the climate science behind a lot of these things. I do find myself in national parks a lot, so I'll talk to their conservationists and park staff to make sure I'm creating fully realized and informed art.
Being an artist can be solitary at times, but a strong artist community has enormous benefits for growth and inspiration. Lisa explores the most important reasons artists should cultivate their creative peer network.
Inspiration number one, for sure. And because art does not exist in a vacuum, and you do need to be able to bounce these ideas off of people and have your conversations and get inspired. You'll learn about new books or quotes. Or I just went out to an artist talk the other day and there was all these resources that I'd never heard of. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm definitely going to check out that podcast or this book or that philosopher. And it may not be what's right for my work, but it's important to think about that and be fully as informed as possible, as educated as possible, so that you can really speak to these things. Because while we are making paintings, we still do need to have the conversations around the paintings. People have questions. You want to be able to also, in turn, inspire them and maybe make them aware of something. So, having that community to make you a more fully rounded, well rounded artist is essential and exciting. And it's more fun doing things with friends.
Social media can be a powerful tool, but it's easy to feel overwhelmed by it. Lisa shares her honest take on how she navigates being online without strict rules and why her presence there supports not just her art practice, but her wider creative community.
I have no rules about anything. I'm not a very well disciplined person. And that's the thing I've just acknowledged about myself at this point. I don't give myself a hard time. I don't beat myself up about it. I'm not going to pretend to be somebody I'm not. If I need to be somewhere on time, I will be there, barring any technological hurdles. That's just not who I am. But that said, I'm on social media a lot because I do a lot as an artist. If I was just in the studio, I for sure would be on it a lot less. But I also do run a gallery. I'm also the president of my alumni association. So I'm doing a lot of cross promotion for other artists and research and just being aware of what people are doing. So I'm on it frequently, more than I personally would want to be, but it's got its uses and its purposes.
Lisa structures her life around making art. But being an artist is not just about creating, it's also about having a plan for the necessities of life and doing whatever it takes to truly make the space for your work.
Everything I do is towards the end of being an artist and making art. Do wish I had more time in the studio. I'm happiest when I just have days in a row in a studio, which has evaded me the last couple of years with these other commitments I've taken on. However, the commitments have also opened up doors of opportunities. So in an ideal world, I'll just be given piles of cash and no responsibility, and I'm just making art. But that's just not the world that ever exists, or at least that I don't exist in. So I acknowledge that I need help with health insurance. And I bought this cabin that I'm in right now, and I knew that would be an overhead, and I need money and financial security to do stuff like that. The work that I'm doing for sure still feeds the opportunity to be an artist because it allows me to have a space that is just mine. My studio is now a full acre and a half of just outdoor space that's mine. It's just finding that balance of what you need in the moment and also being able to produce the art that you want. Right now is a little rough with the economy. A lot of people are buying art right now. Three of my dealers are closing up shop. And so art sales are usually the majority of my income, but not that I predicted anything that was happening right now, but I had a little bit of financial security by having had said yes to this one job, which I only took with the caveat that I am a full-time painter. So if they're hiring me, I need to paint, I need to travel, I need to take a lot of time off. And I paint at my office and I sometimes I'll bring paintings there for studio visits. So it's all, again, it's all a feeder to the ultimate essence of being a producing artist who's also committed to her community and participatory in it.
Lisa's second piece, Atlantic Swell, marked a turning point in her career. She began exploring the emotional and psychological depth of landscapes, seeing them as metaphors for personal upheaval. In this seascape, she lets go and moves away from strict realism to embrace mood, ambiguity, and transformation.
It's oil paint on linen, which is not the pivot because I've always painted on linen or paper or aluminum. I'm known for the aluminum, and I would say that's my favorite surface to work on. But what was pivotal about this painting in particular, I was able to let go of a lot. This whole series started from this other painting, which kind of predated the series, where I was making these paintings about the disappearing shorelines of Long Island. Again, with the work that I'm making, it's important for me to have a lot of eyes on it because climate change affects everybody. This was shortly after Sandy had happened, 4 or 5 years after. But as I'm making these paintings, I'm seeing that they're getting darker and more tumultuous and a bit more nefarious or anxious, a lot of angst in them. And what was happening is in my personal life, I was going through a major upheaval. I feel as artists, we have a lot of these restarts. A lot of artists are seeing that right now with what's happening in the United States and how it's impacting a lot of the world. But it for sure happened with the pandemic. It happened microcosmically with Sandy, where I was. But also, I had it at this point in my life when the life I thought, the trajectory I thought I was on, completely fell out from under my feet with no warning. And I had to regroup. I was living on couches. I just didn't know what happened. I was completely blindsided and had to really refigure out a lot of things. So making these paintings and I'm seeing they're getting darker. I was like, oh, these are now psychological landscapes. They're not about climate change. They're about the hopeful triumph in the face of adversity. That's what climate change is. And it allowed me to start really humanizing the story a bit more, try to think about these paintings as not just documentarian of a space, of a place that somebody may never go to or see or have anything to do with, but really thinking about them more psychologically. So I let the brushwork loosen up a lot more and I let a lot of information go away. There's really nothing in the foreground. I wanted the viewer to be faced with this black field of dense layers of paint, which are sprayed with water. And there's just like a lot of dense texturing going on. It's very dense dark. And then just having a little bit of light, making these reductive landscapes to just really not giving a clear, there's a horizon there, but what's beyond it? It's a non-space. Just really thinking a bit more metaphorically with the landscape.
Difficult times are a part of life. They will happen, and when they do, you might have to recalibrate everything. As an artist, this might mean a completely new way of working. Listen as Lisa shares how she rebuilt her life after a major personal crisis and how community helped her heal.
You never know when it's going to happen, right? I think when you're really knocked down, you're blindsided, and where do you go from there? And in hindsight, especially this moment that I'm referring to, looking back, I don't know how I did it. There's no way I could have planned it. I think it was a lot of adrenaline. There's a phrase I heard, which I don't know where it was from, but I think it's just a common phrase, which really is so true, which is you're never more alive than when your world is turned upside down. And because you're really dealing with raw emotion and your raw survival skills that you may not know that you had. And I landed okay through all that because I had friends who were like, come stay with me. Let's do this curatorial project together. Not just to the therapist, but to the world. I said, I need help. I need places to stay. I need to figure out my income. I need to figure out how I'm going to have a studio practice within all of this mess and what makes sense and where I'm going to move to. Just being completely vulnerable and saying, I need help. The one thing you can prepare for is having that network that you've been nurturing and cultivating your whole life as an artist to then go and speak to. In the moment, I was like, all right, I need to figure out how to make X amount of dollars and I'm going to give myself 3 years to figure it out. And I figured it out in 1 year. And then I was like, you know what? I don't need to be in New York City. I'm not happy here. I need to really deal with my wounds right now. I want to go somewhere where I have space to just turn off all of the noise of New York and just clean out the scars, like really dig in there, clean them out and figure out how to move on from this, which you don't really move on, I think, from any trauma. You just learn how to live with it, which is beautiful. It's an evolution, and hopefully you can only be better for any traumatic experience that you encounter.
The business of art is sensitive to the larger economic climate. Artists often experience profound effects in their sales as a result of economic shifts. Lisa gets very honest about how she's pivoting and thinking creatively about income streams in uncertain times.
Shortly after the election in the US, painting sales pretty much froze up. And I had a couple commissions fall by the wayside, and three of my dealers announced that they were either downsizing or closing. And paintings just have not really been moving. Fortunately, I have that day job. However, my overhead still exceeds what the day job is because I did have this whole other income, which is now gone. So I'm teaching more. The classes haven't started yet, but I'm intending to teach workshops at my cabin. I'm like, if I have this property, have it make money for me. I'm doing promotion for that now to have private workshops here where people can live with me for a weekend. We'll have dinner and cocktails, alcoholic or non-alcoholic, and paint all day on the property or nearby. It's like weekend with Lisa. It's very intimate. It'll only be 2 to 3 people. And I really only need to have one of those a month to make up for everything. So there's that. There's a workshop I had been teaching, which I'll continue with. And I also reached out to my grad school to teach a CE class of plein air painting in Central Park, which I'd done in the past, but I stopped doing because I didn't need that income. I've also started doing small works on paper, very affordable price points. I like doing that anyway as a studio practice. I think of them as practicing your scales for a musical performance. So I've been doing these 12 off series. Beginning of the year, I did Oceans, one for each month, and that sold out right away. So then I did another round. Okay, I was like, here's another 12 months, and then that sold, and then I did another round. I still have half of those left. But then this one I just actually launched today is of icebergs because people were so excited about, I was excited too, about this iceberg in Severance that I was like, let me think about icebergs again. And I just did these 12 little ditties, as I call them, and we'll see how that goes. It's off to a good start. So just, rebranding a bit. In November, December, I usually do a print sale of my work, and it's usually quite lucrative. And this year it is down a lot. The sales are good. They're paintings I've already made. So I have a store online. It's just there. It's pretty much passive income, except for they are printed to order and they're individually signed and packaged. And I have cute little stories that I include with them. But with Severance, people wanted a piece of the show. And I was lucky that the show did actually mention me in Variety magazine. So then I was able to actually promote my work. I had to be a little bit careful and cautious based on the contract I had with them. But once my name was out there, I was like, okay, I can go ahead and promote this. So that also has been a nice little boon for me.
Lisa's painting November Waves captures more than just the sea. For Lisa, the piece shows how peer support fuels her practice, both in the field and back in the studio.
It's a very long, large painting. It's 25 inches by 80 of a seascape. And the way this painting came about was there's a group of artists I frequently go out painting with. Once a year, we have this, it's called PA Paint Out. It's in Pennsylvania. One of the artists, Patricia Watwood, it's on a property she has. We hire a model and we go and we paint together for 4 days in the wilderness, living in tents. It's off grid. And we have the model and we play music at night. It's a nice gathering of artists' minds, right? And where everything's completely pared down. There's no connectivity or anything. And we've then taken that to one of the other artists, Kristen Kuntz. She has a place near the Jersey Shore. So we started going to her property once a year and doing the same thing. So we went out to the Atlantic Highlands beach nearby Gateway National Park. And I did a series of plein air paintings of a beautiful day we were there. So they were just these small little paintings. There's like 3 of them, very small. I did one. I was like, I want to do another. This is like the moving waves. It was just an exercise of how do I capture the energy of this moving water. So I ended up doing 3 little ones that could be seen as their own triptych. And then I was like, you know what? I want to paint that large. So this is mostly made up, but from memory and of that day and being with my artist friends. And there's the quote by the composer John Cage, and then Philip Gaston also requoted it, which is about studio ghosts, which I'm going to completely butcher because I wasn't planning to say the quote today. But it's this idea that when you're in the studio, there's the voices of your teachers and the critics and your peers, and one by one, they all leave, and then eventually you leave, and it's just you and the art, right? That's when the art happens, the gist of the quote. But that said, I love that my friends are with me in my studio. I don't know that I ever want them to leave. They do, obviously. But working on this piece, my friends were there because I did the original plein air pieces when they were there. It speaks to how it's important for me to spend time with the subject matter because I'm not painting the literal landscape, but the feeling of it. So in this piece, there's also the feeling of my artist friends being by my side, my people who we all build each other up. We're always creating opportunities for each other. We've had exhibitions. This particular group of artists, we also have a once a week accountability group. We meet on Zoom. And my friend Patty, she's established these rules. What is something you're struggling with? What are you happy about? What's one goal that you're going to establish by next week? It's total accountability group. So it's just this really great group of artists that we all make completely different work. We show at different institutions. Some of us have different educations, but we have this inherent goal to build each other up.
Lisa reminds us that making art starts with living fully. For her, art thrives at the intersection of experience, emotion, and community.
It's one of my mantras, which is have that joie de vivre. Go out and live life because an art without life lived is not, what is it, right? So make sure you're really going out there. It's important to be in the studio, but you also have to be out in the world and talking to artists and talking to people outside of the arts. You have to have this community, these connections, and really be passionate. Super important to be passionate because whatever you're feeling about what you're painting, that's going to come through. And embrace the chaos. Go with the flow, man. Ride the wave.
Lisa Lebofsky's story shows us how art and life are inseparable. Her fearless commitment to capturing the beauty of endangered landscapes teaches us how jumping headfirst into the wild beauty of the world is a courageous recipe for both meaningful art and a beautiful life. Creating community wherever she goes, Lisa inspires us to invest in our creative network and shows us the true power of connection in sustaining a professional art career. This podcast grows because people like you share it. So if you got value today, if it inspired you to think differently or take action, hit follow or subscribe and send it to one person who needs to hear it. That's how we keep making more episodes. Thank you for listening to the Professional Artist Podcast, and until next time.